نرسیدیم. ما یک
We worked out a 5-month framework with France for a period between now and the end of the year.
I very much appreciate President Macron's involvement, but we're not dealing through President Macron. People are dealing with us directly. We don't have to go through another country.
We have much more leverage outside of the deal to achieve our goal of preventing Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon than we had inside the deal.
Iran stepping up its centrifuges as of this Friday. Meantime, France is trying to get Iran to buy in by essentially buying out Iran with $15 billion. Let's bring in our panel. Charles Hurt, opinion editor for The Washington Times. Steve Clements, editor-at-large for The Hill, and Washington Post columnist Marc Thiessen. Okay, Marc, what about this? The president's play, what we're doing, what France is doing.
So what's happening with Europe is this. The fact is Iran has a lot of leverage over Europe because Europe trades with Iran, we do not. Europe is dependent on oil coming through the Straits of Hormuz. Thanks to the fracking revolution, we are not dependent on Middle Eastern oil in the same way. So they have a lot more leverage on the French and the Europeans than they do us. What their strategy is to pressure the Europeans to pressure us. Now, is that going to work? No, it's not going to work. And the reason is that President Trump is willing to talk to the Iranians. He said that, but he's in no hurry because his Iran strategy is working. The sanctions are having a huge grip on them. Oil exports, oil revenues are down 96%. Government revenue, the oil sanctions have wiped out 40% of Iran's budget. As a result, they have less money to fund terrorism, less money for expansionism around the world. So, this strategy is working, and he's going to stick with it.
Steve?
Well, I think Marc is right and wrong. I mean, and I think in the sense that certainly the sanctions are crippling Iran's economy and going that way. But what you're seeing is the social contract between Europe and the United States come apart. They're no longer on the same page on foreign policy. You're seeing France try to cut a new deal, because the deal of the Iran deal was Iran would behave on the nuclear front, but the nations of the world would invest in it. And really, the moment that deal got violated is not when we left the JCPOA. It's when Donald Trump began lobbying against investment inside Iran. And that's when Javad Zarif and Rouhani and others basically said, you're no longer living up to the deal. So that's why the French are putting a monetary dimension on. But it's a complete split in the alliance and relationship, which we've been seeing get deeper and deeper. That may be good for us, and I think Marc's absolutely right that fracking has given us that ability. But we used to be the guarantor for global oil and energy supply for our allies. That's no longer the case. It's coming undone.
The administration said that Iran was, one, not living up to it anyway, and two, doing all kinds of other things with missiles and support of Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations. Charlie, I joked today in a meeting that maybe France would have been better off to offer the $15 billion to Donald Trump. And maybe then the meeting would have moved forward. I'm not sure. But
well, certainly money talks as far as Donald Trump is concerned. But what we're seeing right now with Iran and their efforts to ramp up or reverse the restrictions on their nuclear program, I think reveals just how bad the deal was to begin with, because what they're doing right now, they could have easily done at the end of the 10 years when the sunset provision. Obviously, Iran would far rather deal with France and Europe than deal directly with Donald Trump. They've made that very clear. Donald Trump, I think, has sort of called their bluff by offering to deal directly with them. But if the Trump election didn't mean anything else, it was a signal that American voters were tired of military adventurism abroad, where we go and topple bad dictators. The only thing worse than that is what Iran is doing, which is trying to support. Going overseas, meddling to support in places like Syria, and it can't end well.
The interesting thing today at the State Department, $15 million. Take a listen to their proposal.
We are announcing a reward of up to $15 million for any person who helps us disrupt the financial operations of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and Quds Force. Today's announcement is historic. It's the first time that the United States has offered a reward for information that disrupts a government entity's financial operations.
I mean, talk about putting the screws on.
It's great. I love it.
Mark's going to submit a proposal.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely. I've been scribbling here at the table, of course. Look, I mean, this is, if you think about what's happening around the maximum pressure, the Iran economy is contracting, inflation is spiraling, and the regime has been forced to cut funding to all of its terrorist proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah. They've cut funding for the military. They've cut funding for the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Quds Force. That in and of itself is a good. And Trump said today in the Oval Office, he said Iran is not the same country it was when he came into office. It's absolutely right. When he came into office, they were on the march across the Middle East. Today, they're being pushed back within their borders.
Quickly, Steve, but the what's next if this pressure continues to build and the escape valve is not Europe? We don't know.
No, what's next is I think Donald Trump is going to get his meeting with Rouhani. I think, I think a year ago I interviewed Foreign Minister Zarif, and at that point there had been 8 or 9 attempts to try to get a White House meeting. I think the president's appetite for that freaks out the Saudis and the Emiratis, who know that the president would like to have that meeting, and he's going to push and pressure Iran until he gets the meeting. And the president, even in his comments today, has basically said he'd be up for it. He says they should want one.
We will see. Next up, a lightning round of sorts about the Democrats and what's going on.
This program is to defeat Donald Trump, and Biden is right. That's what we got to do. But here is the but. I think that's not enough. Joe voted for the war in Iraq. Joe voted for the Wall Street bailout. I did not. Joe voted for some very bad trade deals, which I didn't vote for.
Bernie Sanders on The View today, also going head-to-head with Joe Biden, saying details matter about the stories he tells. Meantime, the Biden camp saying, according to Politico, do I think we have to win Iowa? No. We think we're going to win. We think it's going to be a dogfight, but we think there are several candidates in this field. There's probably 3 or 4 that are going to go a while. Back with the panel. Charlie, that's not the best pitch in September. We don't have to win Iowa.
It's lowering expectations.
Yeah, it's definitely lowering expectations. Yeah, on paper, Joe Biden is the front runner, but he seems lost. He doesn't seem to know why he's running. He's recently suggested maybe the only reason he's running is because Donald Trump is president and he wants to take it out. I mean, running a presidential campaign, it's hard. It's grueling. It's a test. It's a mental test. It's everything. And if you are not 1,000% into it, you're going to get destroyed.
Yeah, look
either
at
in the primary or the general.
The polls. We've got national, Iowa, and New Hampshire all in one. These are the average of recent polls. There you see Biden leading in every one. New Hampshire less than others. Steve still well positioned despite all the bumps.
Very well positioned. He's a guy who's he told me once that the Democrats had become a party of snobs, and he's trying to do that. And I think trying to basically change the course of the party, get where real people are. And I think with whatever he said about Iowa, maybe New Hampshire, he knows he's got South Carolina in the bank.
Rudy Giuliani thought he had Florida too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I get it. But I think that we sometimes are counting numbers, looking at this, and we don't realize that white Democrats, and people who had voted for Barack Obama voted for Donald Trump. They voted for him because of emotion, because they saw him as a wrecking ball. They saw him, this rich guy with golf courses, as a guy on their side. And I think we underestimate that element of Joe Biden. And I know my colleague here doesn't necessarily agree with that, but he's a guy who connects with people emotionally like many of these other candidates do not.
They voted for Trump because under Obama, Biden, they lost 500,000 manufacturing jobs, and now they've gained 500,000.
Well, that's true.
But look, what I think the Democrats haven't figured out yet is that Joe Biden is the Democrats' Mitt Romney. So if you think back to 2012, Republicans were terrified that some Tea Party extremist who was unelectable was going to be nominated. So they went with the wishy-washy, gaffe-prone, moderate candidate that really no one was very energized about him. They just wanted to get rid of Barack Obama. It's the same thing happening right now. The Democrats, they got a wishy-washy, gaffe-prone moderate who's running away with their nomination right now, and no one is enthusiastic about him. And just being against the president as opposed to being for your candidate is not a winning formula.
And yet, on climate change, Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang is the only guy out there who said the way to get to our climate numbers, we've also got to invest in nuclear. It just blared out on the page with me. I've read every single one of the climate proposals, and he's the only one who mentioned the word nuclear. I think he gets a gold star.
They all cost a lot of money.
Oh my gosh, it's just astonishing. And think about how frustrating it must be for a regular, normal, sane Democrat out there, and they're listening to all their candidates talk about things like, open borders, free health care for illegals, and reparations. They're just pulling their hair out. Of course they're behind Biden.
We'll see. Next debate, the 12th. Thank you, panel. When we come back, more great stories of people helping people during and after the hurricane.